Palestinian genocide, I think, is different because it is a product of late-stage colonialism, really. You talked about post-colonial conflicts, and of course we know that since the Second World War, there has been a long process of decolonization, and starting really in many ways with India in 1947. And so in many parts of the world, the conflicts which are taking place are conflicts over the control of or the shape of the post-colonial states. The situation in Palestine is similar in a sense, but in Palestine, of course, we have the state of Israel, which was created by European colonists, by European Jews who left to come to Israel, or in many cases were forced to leave Europe as a result of persecution in Europe, and indeed, of course, as a result of the genocide during the Second World War. So.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to every one of you. My name is Dr. Shubda Chaudhary, and this is Middle East Insights platform. And today we are going to discuss a very, very essential topic, which is between massacre and genocide, understanding the human cost of Israel-Palestine conflict. The human cost, the humanitarian consequences, that is something which has been often lost from the narrative. There's an oblivion around it, still continuing today, 7th of October. 1 year has passed in this utter mayhem, dystopian nightmare that all of us are living in. And we are consuming it through social media. We are consuming it through other narratives. Everyone has an ideology. Everyone has some kind of judgment or preconceived notions, which are often blurred. And there are terminologies that often we are not allowed to use. So there is also a massive amount of censorship. Today we have Martin Shaw with us, and we are very, very privileged to have him. He's Emeritus Professor of International Relations at Sussex University. I would later call my volunteer Fayaz to introduce him and to do justice to his cause in better terms. But one thing which I would like to draw your attention to. So since 7th of October, there have been 26,000 rockets which have been fired at Israel. 12,200 of them are from Gaza, 12,400 of them are from Lebanon, 400 of them are from Iran, 110 are from Yemen. Actually, there's an attack expected from Yemen tonight. 60 are from Syria. There are 7 lakh settlers in West Bank right now, the area which is called as Judea and Samaria. 144 settlements in West Bank and 12 in East Jerusalem. The recent survey also revealed that 61 to 71% of Israelis do not feel safe anymore. 2 days back was the happy birthday of Hirsch Goldberg, one of the hostages whose body was recently given by Hamas. He would have turned 24 2 days back. At the same time, what is happening on the other side? 180,000 Palestinians have been killed. 814 mosques have been destroyed. 35,000 orphans have been created. 80% of Gazan infrastructure has been decimated. There's polio, the resurgence of it. 30,000 children are missing their limbs. 1.5 million people have been displaced from Gaza. 300 journalists have been killed. All of the Gaza universities have been destroyed. 3 churches have been destroyed. Turning to Lebanon, 1.3 million people in Lebanon itself have been displaced. 3,000 Lebanese have been killed. The medical infrastructure, water access, ethnic cleansing is going on. Israel has bombed Beirut. White phosphorus thermobaric bombs have been used. But above all, there's a difference now which is emerging between genocidal reality and genocidal denial. More than 1,000 healthcare workers have been killed. More than 300 journalists have been killed. So to further talk about the intensity of this conflict and how we should understand it, we have Martin Shaw with us today, and we are very privileged to have him speak with us. But before that, I would like to invite my volunteer, Fayaz Mehndi, to introduce him. Thank you, Fayaz.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. Before we begin, I would like to introduce a little bit about myself. I'm Fayaz Mehdi, postgraduate of Amity University. And now, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and respected colleagues, a very warm welcome to all of you for today's seminar on the topic Between Massacre and Genocide, Understanding the Human Cost of the Israel-Palestine Conflict. In the complexities of modern international relations, few subjects are as emotionally charged, politically contentious, or historically deep-rooted as the Israel-Palestine conflict. Today, we aim to unravel the layers of this issue, focusing on the devastating human toll it has taken on lives, communities, and societies. To guide us through this difficult yet critical discussion, we are incredibly fortunate to have with us one of the foremost scholars of global conflicts, Professor Martin Shaw. Professor Martin is not just an academic, but a pioneer in the study of war, genocide, and international relations. He brings a unique lens to today's topic, shaped by decades of groundbreaking research. He holds the esteemed position of Research Professor of International Relations at the Institute of Barcelona, and is also a well-regarded emeritus professor of international relations and politics at University of Sussex. His contributions to sociology and international relations have redefined how we understand some of the most harrowing events of our time. Among his seminal works, War and Genocide stands out, shedding light on the evolving nature of genocide in modern conflicts, a lens through which we will also examine today's theme. With his recent book, What is Genocide?, Professor Martin Shaw continues to challenge conventional thinking, offering nuanced insights into how we understand the darkest chapters of human history. But Professor Shaw's contributions don't stop at academia. His role as a co-founder of the journal Sociology and his profound articles in prestigious publications have influenced global conversations on war, peace, and justice. In addition, his research at the Center for the Study of Social and Global Justice has helped deepen our understanding of the mechanisms that drive mass violence, a topic particularly relevant today. As we engage with the Israel-Palestine conflict in today's session, Professor Martin Shaw will help us navigate the fine line between massacre and genocide, offering a clearer view of the atrocities that define this enduring conflict. His expertise will help us understand not only the historical backdrop, but also the current implications, especially when viewed through the lens of international law and human rights. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Martin Shaw to the stage as he leads us in his essential conversation on the human cost of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Middle East Insights platform wholeheartedly welcome Professor Martin Shaw.
Thank you so much, Fayaz. Thank you so much for your presence. And so formally, sir, this is what we could do to little bit justify your work.
Thank you very much. It's very kind.
Thank you, sir. So my first question to you is, over the period of time, you have seen the birth of so many so-called post-colonial countries of today. You have seen a lot of conflict, be it in Vietnam, be it in Nicaragua, be it during Iran-Iraq war, be it Al-Nakba, be it Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan, Nigeria, South Africa. How is the Palestinian genocide different?
Well, in the Palestinian genocide, I think is different because it is a product of late stage colonialism. Really, you talked about post-colonial conflicts, and of course we know that since the Second World War, there has been a long process of decolonization. And starting really in many ways with India in 1947, and so in many parts of the world, the conflicts which are taking place are conflicts over the control of or the shape of the post-colonial states. The situation in Palestine is similar in a sense, but in Palestine, of course, we have the State of Israel, which was created by European colonists, by European Jews who left to come to Israel, or in many cases were forced to leave Europe as a result of persecution in Europe, and indeed, of course, as a result of the genocide during the Second World War. So the State of Israel is an unusual state in that sense, that it's in a sense resulted from the splitting of the colonial territory of Palestine, which was under a League of Nations mandate, and the carving out of a Jewish state in Palestine resulted from that process, and it's different from most other situations, because in most other situations, the European colonists were eventually sidelined from control of the state, or failed in their attempt to establish breakaway states. So eventually in Algeria or in South Africa or in what is now Zimbabwe, the European colonists who tried to control the state or to create their own territory were forced to give up and either reconcile themselves to a pluralistic order and effectively to the supremacy of the majority, or in the case of Algeria especially, many of them left. So that's I suppose historically that's where Israel fits in. But of course it is unique in other ways as well, because of the particular symbolic importance of Palestine for the world's religions, because of the depth of the persecution of the Jews in Europe and the extremity of the Holocaust, all of which have given Israel enormous symbolic importance in world politics. And of course now, from the fact that not only were the Palestinians forced out in 1948 of a large part of Palestine, which became the State of Israel, but of course they have been fighting for 70 odd years. Unlike some other situations that might be compared in earlier periods of history, the Palestinians have had a strong national movement. Even if it's been fragmented, they have been fighting for their freedom, for their self-determination now for all these decades. And this side of the conflict, of course, has become incredibly symbolically important for the global South, for millions of people and indeed people across the world in many countries, identify symbolically with the plight of the Palestinians and the struggle of the Palestinians. So in all these ways, it's. I haven't even mentioned the strategic importance of the Middle East, which which is, I suppose, fairly obvious because of oil and everything else. In all these ways, this is an overdetermined conflict. It's a conflict which is, it assumes extreme importance in world politics, even though the population of Israel and Palestine is really quite small. I mean, you could fit it into one city in India, couldn't you? One of your biggest cities. The whole population of Israel plus Palestine would fit into it. But for all these reasons, it's so important.
For example, for the students, Israel-Palestine is not bigger than Delhi NCR region. So do you think that any kind of solution is possible? We are continuously talking about a two-state solution.
Well, yes. It seems to me that that if there is to be a solution in the short to medium term, probably in the medium term, not the short term, it will be some sort of two-state solution because it seems like, although there are many people who say that the two-state solution, as it has been discussed over the recent decades, is now no longer possible because of the way in which Israel has undermined that process, and Benjamin Netanyahu especially has been associated with weakening the framework of agreement which seemed to exist a few decades ago, 30 years ago, about a two-state solution. So there are many people who would say, and there are many reasons for saying that a two-state solution is not possible at the moment. That is, and so then people say, well, really, now because Israel has effectively incorporated the occupied territories into its territory, even if now they haven't done that fully and legally, the solution, but many people would say the solution is a one state, a single state, a pluralistic secular state in which the two communities will coexist. I suppose the obvious objection to that, apart from the power realities at the moment, is the fact that as a result of the extreme conflict which has taken place, and not least in the last 12 months, it is very unlikely it's not really possible to see that kind of solution working. The sort of dreams that people had a few years ago about that don't really seem to stack up anymore in the light of what is happening now. So if there were to be any kind of solution, it would have to be an independent Palestine alongside an independent Israel. And but obviously that it's easier to say that than to think of a way in which that can actually practically be created at the present time. Having said that, I think it does very much depend on the power relations. At the moment, Israel believes that it is very strong and that it doesn't need to make any concessions, and even a big section of Israeli society politics thinks that they can actually take over more of the West Bank, if not the whole of the West Bank, more of Gaza. It depends really whether, in fact, Israel is as strong as it thinks it is, and whether the medium-term outcome of this conflict will demonstrate Israel's greater strength, which is, on the surface seems to be the case at the moment, or whether this conflict will reveal underlying weaknesses in Israel's position.
Yeah. Now that is we did interview Professor Saad Nimar from Birzeit University, West Bank, and he said that the only solution right now is one state solution. We are already in a one state. We need voting rights, and there's massive amount of trauma that is associated with and trauma also faced by innocent Israeli citizens who are continuously grieving today. They are talking about piyus. Piyus is reconciliation in Hebrew. and identifying each other's trauma and history. I also would like to tell you, sir, that initially to the audience members, the topic of this conversation was when geopolitics meets genocide. But recently something happened that forced me to change the topic. And that reason is that Rachel Blevins is a YouTuber in Austin, Texas, and her entire YouTube channel was removed. Entire YouTube channel was removed because she supposedly violated the hate speech policy. Her YouTube channel had more than 63,000 subscribers, 8 years of tireless work. And the only reason that was given to the deletion of her account was hate speech, when there was nothing. If you go to Rumble or Patreon to have a look at the work she has been doing, she has been using the terms genocide. She has been using, trying to be more honest about what is happening in Russia, Ukraine, what is happening in Gaza, what is happening in West Bank, Lebanon. And that was one of the reasons that automatically her, YouTube account was removed. The next question, sir, that I have for you is, how do you think that the larger Jewish diaspora, which is in Europe, in UK, in US, there's a Jewish diaspora, one of the oldest ones in Iran also. How do you think that the Jewish diaspora is responding to the developments? For example, those who are not accepting the trauma which is faced by the Israelis, they are stating that the Israelis are weaponizing the trauma or the trauma industry in their favor. But at the same time, this kind of rhetoric also is a kind of cancel culture, which takes away the space to mourn grief by thousands of Israelis who had to suddenly pack up and leave from the kibbutz. And they are right now in bomb shelters and in safe zones, and they don't know when they'll get back. No one has got back till now.
Well, I'm not Jewish, and I'm not really an expert on Jewish communities in the diaspora. But obviously observing this situation, I think Jewish communities are very torn about what is happening. I think there is obviously huge sympathy for the people in Israel and the families, especially of the hostages who have suffered so much over the last year, and rightly so. And those of us who are not Jewish, should also be feeling that, I think. But at the same time, I think there is a lot of concern and probably a lot of confusion as well about the situation, because first of all, Israel itself is very divided. Before this crisis emerged, the Israeli public was split down the middle over the Israeli government's policies. And although Israel has the Israeli population have largely rallied to this terrible war that it has been fighting, and the people within Israel, I think, have not been exposed fully to the consequences of Israel's campaign in Gaza. Jews outside Israel, especially in Europe, I think, are much more exposed to that because the media coverage has been, although it has probably been tilted in Israel's favor, it has also included a lot of coverage of the atrocities that Israel has committed. And and so I think that the Jewish communities are divided. I think that there is a large section which is not very sympathetic to Netanyahu, and which sees that the Palestinians have a case, and that there needs to be some sort of reconciliation of these different views. And but at the same time, I think there's variation. I mean, the situation in the United States is quite different from that in most European countries. In Europe, there has been much more space for the pro-Palestinian movement to develop. It hasn't been squeezed out to quite the same extent and repressed in the way that it has been in the States. And so I think that the Jewish communities have produced much more aware of what is going on, and that there is a substantial liberal section of Jewish opinion which recognizes the plight of the Palestinians and recognizes the need for some reconciliation of Jewish and Palestinian suffering and some sort of solution which is not the continuation of the war. So concretely, obviously, the question of a ceasefire has been the question which has divided these different strands of opinion.
Yes, sir. It is so the identity politics, the geopolitics of emotions, the kind of binary thinking, us versus them, of both the camps and many other actors that have now plunged themselves into it. It creates this very strong, or instead of strong, I think it creates a very fragile space where communication is not possible.
Mm.
And when I was in West Bank, I realized that Israelis and Palestinians, for example, the settlers, they have no contact with the Palestinians at all. The Palestinians have different roads. Most of West Bank is divided by the apartheid wall. On a regular basis, Israelis do not have an encounter with the Palestinians. That is one thing. And the second thing is that many Palestinians in West Bank have never met the Palestinians in Gaza. They have never met. It's like two different spaces and temporal realities existing side by side. They know there's Gaza, but no one from the West Bank will get the permit to go to Gaza, no one vice versa. But that is about for every product, like be it dates, be it olives, be it even textiles, every product, there's most of the West Bank Palestinians avoid buying the products which have the Israeli mark. And most of them are boycotting to work and they don't have money. So that is something which is very difficult to even understand the context if one has not experienced it.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
And the next question is from our volunteer Tabassum. She's saying that, sir, as you said, one secular state could be possible solution. Her question is, what will be that state if there's a one-state solution? Will it be called Israel? Will it be called Palestine? If I'm not wrong, Palestinians wholeheartedly welcome Jews. They could have lived peacefully then. And does the West really want to resolve it? If it wanted, the West could have resolved it decades back.
Well, there's a lot in there, really, isn't there? I think that's first of all, I don't think that there's any way at the moment that we can see the path towards the creation of either a one-state or a two-state solution. At the moment, we are in the midst of this very, very extreme crisis, which may get even worse, and we don't know really how the chips will fall if there is a more serious war. it may be that that what we are in for is a continuation of the present, and the present is really a situation where Israel has fractured the Palestinian space in the way that you were talking about, in the way it affects the everyday lives of Palestinians in the different parts of what used to be Palestine, within Israel itself, in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, and in Gaza, and in all those places, things are different from each other. I mean, this is part of what people mean by when they talk about it as a sort of apartheid system. But I don't see really a way in which a single state could be created. I think the sort of solution that more sophisticated solution that people talk about sometimes is some sort of confederal arrangement, where you would have separate Palestinian and Israeli authorities, but some sort of overall arrangement between them, which would jointly manage the economic space, and maybe allow for movement across the borders of the two entities within that confederal arrangement. There's a lot of people have written about this, and that seems in a way a plausible sort of solution in the abstract, but not really very plausible in the situation which we're in at the moment in terms of the power realities. So I'm not sure whether that completely answers your question. Please come back.
Yeah. Tabassum, you can respond. At the same time, in terms of, secular state, one of the Israeli historians recently said that if, for example, a one-state secular state is envisioned, in the neighborhood, how many Arab countries are secular?
Yes.
That is a valid point.
Yes.
Yeah, if we are trying to impose that kind of secularism on one particular one-state solution, there's no model of that.
I mean, if I could come back on that, I mean, it seems to me that both the Israeli and Palestinian national movements have got such strong momentum at the moment, and they are, to some extent, although there are secular elements in both of them, there are also religious elements on both sides, which help to deepen the difference between them. So I think it is difficult to see a single secular state arising, even if the power realities were different. I think it's more plausible to think about the coexistence of two distinct entities and some sort of overall arrangements between them. But in the end, it will be for Israelis and Palestinians to decide. And so far, we haven't got we have a lot of ideas. I think a lot of good ideas have been produced, but we don't have much concrete work in progress towards any of these solutions.
Yeah, I agree completely, because it's so. For example, in Al-Aqsa Mosque, there is one entry which is for anyone who wants to come into the mosque. The entrance is guarded by the Jordanian security guards. They are not Palestinian. They are not Israelis. The other three entrances, which includes the Wailing Wall and others, they are guided by the IDF. And within, yes, I come from the most populous country of the world, and our mosques are, completely overcrowded all the time. But in Al-Aqsa, in the Dome of Rock specifically, I saw so few people inside. And in the Armenian churches, the Palestinian Christian churches, I hardly saw anyone. They don't have the entry. The Palestinian Christians, Edward Said was a Palestinian Christian. But this entire, even the idea that Palestinians are also Christians, they're also Armenians who have already suffered a genocide, also living in East Jerusalem. These are few intricacies which are avoided. Also, there are many Palestinian Jews. And it becomes so complex to put all of these together because how
Yes.
can you be an Israeli Arab and then a Palestinian Jew and then an Israeli citizen but still a Palestinian? It's very confusing. But coming to the next question, sir, of Gorang, it is that in the context of reconciliation, and say there's a potential for two states to be formed after the genocidal trauma, how will this trauma influence the tactical mindset of the states? Now, the state includes the population, the intelligence, the deep state, the border security, all of it. Some scholars argue that it will trigger a reflex among political elites to avoid any harm to the affected ethnography. Potentially, it will normalize violence on an everyday scale. Conversely, the reconciled states might exist, but might have peace and stability. So, how do we understand this dichotomy? The question is a bit long. So, in simple terms, if there's a two-state solution, how will the genocidal trauma impact it? How will the politicians use it?
Well, there are different ways in which they can use it, aren't there? I mean, we have seen, because we know we have the history of genocide affecting the conflict in Israel and Palestine over the last century. We have, the effects of the Holocaust on Jewish, well, first of all, on Jewish immigration, but also on the Jewish national movement. So the Zionist movement gained enormous additional strength in the 1930s and 1940s as a result of the additional immigration into Israel, into Palestine rather, as a result of the persecution and the Holocaust. And then also because of the political legitimacy which the Holocaust created for the idea of a separate Jewish national state. So we have seen, and that has been the core of a lot of Israeli politics over the last three-quarters of a century. So and it's something which we see that leaders like Netanyahu have exploited to create the political base which they need, both in Israel and in the diaspora and in the wider Western international system, creating the political impact in the United States, which is very, very crucial. So I mean, we have this history, and equally, of course, the experience of the Nakba in 1948 is a foundational experience for the Palestinian national movement, and it's foundational in the lives of many Palestinians. So many of the Gaza population are the people who fled, or the descendants of people who fled from the Nakba, from parts of what is now Israel, and they ended up in refugee camps in Gaza. So it's foundational in that sense, but it's also foundational more in an ideological sense, a symbolic sense, that for Palestinians that experience of victimization is very powerful. So we have these different victimizations, and we have the ways in which they are constructed politically by the two different national movements, and those can be used to construct violent oppositions. They can be constructed, from the point of view of many Jewish Israelis and certainly their political leaders, what happened in Gaza, in southern Israel on October 7th last year, is an experience which links to the history of pogroms and the Holocaust, and it shows that the Palestinians as a whole, not just the Hamas, but the Palestinian population of Gaza as a whole, in some way, for many of these Israeli political leaders and a lot of ordinary Israelis, is guilty of this genocidal threat to Israelis. But then, of course, that has been used to justify what many people see as the genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza over the last 12 months. From one day of terrible massacres on October the 7th last year, we have 365 days of massacres and deliberate starvation and incarceration and torture and the reduction of the whole society to nothing. This in itself, of course, is another experience of the same kind that we have seen before in the Holocaust and with the Nakba. It's a profound experience of national victimization, which is going to affect all those survivors of all of those who survived this experience, but also going to affect the whole of the Palestinian population, not just in Gaza, but in the rest of Palestine and outside of Palestine. And so, this can definitely be used to justify further Palestinian actions of all sorts. And so we can have this cycle of victimization, mutual victimization, and we can have a process which has no end, and which then leads into more conventional wars between opposed states, geopolitical rivals. What we see now between Israel and Iran. So it can become part of something even bigger. But genocide has this particular quality. What I'm suggesting to you, I suppose, is that it is seen as foundational. It is something which registers very largely with populations. It's something which can be mobilized very effectively by political leaders in one way or another. And obviously the challenge is to find ways in which these mutual histories of victimization can be brought together in a way that reconciles, or in a way that but that really involves recognizing what has been done. So Israelis will have to recognize what they have done to Palestinians, not just in the last 12 months, but in the last 75 years. Palestinians will have to recognize the complete unacceptability of the atrocities that Hamas committed 12 months ago, and so there will these are big asks. I think we have some examples in history where reconciliation has happened, where people have moved beyond these sorts of experiences, but predicting how that can come about is not easy, especially in the present circumstances.
Yeah, I agree with you, so that both the sides have to agree, and one of the Palestinians, when just October 7th occurred, he told me that when two elephants fight, it is always the grass that suffers. Mm-hmm. And the grass can be on the Palestinian side, the Israeli side, or in the Lebanese side, or the Iranian side, but there's so many, innocent lives that have been impacted and will be impacted. One more thing that often disturbs me personally is the infusion of God. Also because I'm agnostic, but the infusion of God in the symbolism. For example, today Netanyahu, when he addressed the IDF soldiers, his words were that, I'm paraphrasing, he said that with God's will, we will win. Nasrallah also used to Allah, like Hezbollah always involves Allah, the merciful, and everything. There is all the early Zionists were not religious.
Well, I think the neither the Zionist movement nor the Palestinian national movement is fundamentally a religious movement. There are religious elements within both of them, There are political leaders who will invoke God and who will invoke religious symbols in order to justify their actions within both of them, but they're not religious movements. I think. Can I go back to something we were touching on a moment ago? See, I mean, yeah. I think it is obviously this is there are two sides to this conflict, but the sides are not the whole problem. Really is that the sides are not equal. I think if they were more equal, there would be more likely that they would have come to some sort of recognition of their mutual interests. And we have these histories of victimization, which we're talking about, are not equal. That in the long historical perspective, I suppose the history of Jewish victimization is one of the worst that we could possibly find. But most of that victimization occurred outside of Palestine. That occurred in Europe mainly as a result of what European Christians and later the Nazis and other anti-Semitic regimes did to the Jews in the 19th and early 20th centuries. But in Palestine, the history of victimization is very much more the other way. I mean, Jews certainly have suffered and are suffering, and Palestinians have killed and massacred Jews in some points, but the overwhelming balance of the conflict is one of the persecution of the Palestinians and the denial of their rights, the expropriation of their land, the much higher levels of suffering, and of course in the last 12 months, and really we have to recognise, I suppose, that the last 12 months are exceptional in the history of this conflict. This conflict has been a terrible conflict for 3/4 of a century, and there have been some terrible atrocities, and there has been this systematic pattern of the subordination of the Palestinians to Israel. But there has never been anything like the destruction which we have seen in Gaza in the last 12 months. Yes. The previous attacks on Gaza were terrible, and people at the time protested about them and even said that they were genocidal. But there has not been something like this total destruction of a whole territory and the pulverization of a whole 2 million people, a total population. We haven't seen this. We haven't seen this level of deaths, tens of thousands of deaths. You think before 12 months ago, the main narrative of Palestinian supporters was to call Israel an apartheid state, to draw attention to this separation and subordination of the different elements of Palestine by Israel. But if we compare Israel to South Africa, which is the paradigm of an apartheid state, South Africa never did anything like what is happening in Gaza to the black population. They did some terrible things to black South Africans. It was a history of terrible subordination and repression and poverty and inequality, but it was never a history of massacre on this sort of scale, of war of this kind. So this experience over the last 12 months is unique in that context. It's also, of course, one of the reasons for the way in which it has become a larger international conflict. I think, yep. I mean, Israel and its its American supporters and some others, try to play this down. They try to say, well, the conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon already existed. The conflict with the Houthis already existed. The conflict in the West Bank already existed, and that's all obviously true. But Gaza has been the catalyst for the creation of this much larger field of conflict. It's because Hezbollah, in the end, insisted on coupling their struggle with the struggle in Gaza that we have this terrible new conflict in Lebanon. The same with Yemen. So this is we have been going through a period which is of very big historical importance, I think, and where exactly it's going to lead, I don't think we know yet.
Yeah, they have not allowed any foreign journalists to meticulously scrutinize or even enter Gaza to figure out what exactly is happening. The internet communication is very erratic. And the same case is happening. The Lebanese sovereignty is out of the question. International law is out of the question. And that is something which is very disturbing, because what kind of world are we living in where anyone can... I remember when Israel, during the Nuremberg trials, had found ex-Nazi official who changed his identity, went to live in Latin America. They found him, got him to the Nuremberg trials. It's a very important case study in the concept of justice. But here, even the terminologies of justice are very blurred. I remember writing justice on the apartheid wall. And the apartheid wall is so tall, and I'm quite short. And there's no chalk or there's nothing around where you can write justice or write anything. So there are a few stones thrown. So somehow we are just trying to rub it and write. And you wouldn't believe, within 5 minutes, vanished.
Mm.
So that is the kind of cleansing which takes place. It's 5 minutes gone. And now Anurag is saying over here that Adolf Eichmann, who was tried in 1963, he was bought by Mossad from Latin America. Yes. Gorang is saying that the Israeli ambassador to India. So something which very interestingly happened last year. Hamas is not designated as a terrorist organization by India. So when October 7 took place, one of the magazines, Frontline, had an entire front cover of the Palestinian question. To which the then Israeli ambassador to India wrote a letter. That how can you, dehumanize the victims of October 7 on the Israeli side? So then it became viral. And now the Israeli ambassador then had to leave. We have a new Israeli ambassador now to India. The same Israeli ambassador was also involved in 2005, 2006 in some kind of corruption cases in the US, and some FBI investigation which was stopped. So very interesting stories which are happening. So right now what we are having, sir, is in India a 9-day festival where the Hindus worship Lord Durga. So what the Israeli ambassador has said to India, that this festival, the Shahra, is basically the symbolism is the victory of good over evil. So he has used that kind of symbolism to create that narrative for the political agenda, though the lobbying in India is very strong, very strong. Yeah. Now, Nimra is asking the next question, sir, that how has the media influenced public perception regarding the conflict by the use of terms like massacre or genocide? Are there biases that shape this narrative?
Well, obviously, this whole crisis has been extremely strongly mediated. We have the paradox that you mentioned, that international journalists have not been allowed into Gaza. So a whole year Israel has kept international journalists out of Gaza. But despite that, because of the efforts of Palestinian journalists and others like aid officials who are in Gaza, we do have a very full picture of what is happening. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot that we don't know, but there is an awful lot that we do know. And it has, for anybody who wants to inform themselves, there is an enormous amount of information out there, far more than any of us can really manage, maybe, to take in. But the media have obviously filtered this crisis through their pre-existing frameworks and through their different political angles and directions. So we have a crisis which has been very strongly shaped, and it's I referred before to the fact that in Israel itself, I think that the majority of the population are only aware in a general way of the terrible destruction which Israel has caused in Gaza because they haven't been exposed. Those who don't go to seek it out have not been exposed by the mainstream media to information on what is happening in Western countries generally. In Britain, which obviously I know most directly, there is a substantial amount of information about what is happening in Gaza, but it varies a lot according to the different types of media. So there are some liberal media which are covering the crisis quite fully and are giving a fairly good overall impression of what is happening. But there are a lot of media, a lot of the especially the more right-wing press and TV outlets who are only covering it in a very distorted and often a very limited way. And at the same time, there is a sort of inbuilt censorship, I suppose, around the sort of language that you can use to describe it. You were talking before about the YouTuber whose channel was taken down. That's the sort of thing. I'm not sure how much it's happening in a very direct way like that, but it's happening indirectly in the sense that many of the main TV and press operations have either an explicit or an implicit policy of avoiding the most critical terminology. For example, genocide. The idea of genocide is largely excluded. And I have found as an individual scholar with considerable reputation in the field of genocide, that especially British media do not contact me and are not interested really in at least the more mainstream media are not interested in having my views on this sort of question. That I'm more likely to be contacted by people from India or from Turkey or from the United States or France or all sorts of countries. People contact me to ask my views and ask me to talk about these issues, but the British media themselves don't. I have outlets, but they are relatively fringe outlets. I don't have a voice in the mainstream television and press outlets. And I'm not just speaking about my personal position, but that is true generally of those who talk or can talk at all authoritatively about the significance of genocide for this conflict. They are mostly absent. And I remarked the other day that we mentioned the international role of international law. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, who is British, is a very impressive figure. Actually, has given some very interesting interviews to international media, defending his approach in trying to seek warrants for the arrest of Netanyahu and Gallant, the defense minister, as well as Hamas leaders. And he has not been interviewed on British television. The BBC have not invited him for a major interview. He's a major British figure who is playing this crucial international role, very, very controversial, because all sorts of forces are trying to prevent the International Criminal Court from pursuing these warrants. And yet, or I say yet, but actually maybe because of this, he doesn't really have a very strong voice in his own country. I think it's an interesting example, really.
It is. If I can share my own experience. I've seen different kinds of trolling depending on because every media has its own funding and agenda setting. But I have noticed that there's more trolling when I go to a Hindi media channel.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who is the funder, a Hindi one. So then, when I was trying my hard to just put the point that all Palestinians are not Hamas, all Lebanese are not Hezbollah, simple points. And the necessity of humanitarian, coexistence. I became a Hezbollah agent, a communist, a Congress party member, and and very vitriolic trolling happened. Like, that my body language is not good. And there's also a certain kind of gender washing that takes place when you have only male gender panels and members, and then you invite a woman and then she's easily, questioned. That kind of othering takes place. On the English media, what I have noticed is comparatively, there is, depending on how many people are there in a panel discussion. But comparatively, there's more liberal space till now in India. At the same time, both of them there's very strong pro-Israel sentiment. And I don't have a problem with that, but the idea is that there are many realities existing at the same time.
Yes.
So one has to acknowledge all the realities. Like, one need not dehumanize a Hamas attack survivor for the Palestinian question. And vice versa. There are so many realities happening together. And one needs to have the space for, there are a lot of Israeli peacemakers like Mao Zedong and others who, in spite of personal tragedy and loss, are trying to, come together. And I'm also, I was called Urban Naxal also. So my students are keeping a tag of what all abuses I was called and all of that. It was fun. It was, I strongly believe that if they ask me to come again, I'll go again. They might stop inviting me, but there has to be some kind of, communication. If they call me, they might stop. So my, condition will be similar to yours. Not that it is better, but that I'll see as a moment of pride, by the way. But we are in such a segmented society right now that you never know. So with this, sir, we have already exceeded our time with you, promised.
Right. Yes.
And I would quickly call Fayaz.
Yeah, hi, Lonan. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and esteemed colleagues, as we wrap up today's enlightening seminar on Between Massacre and Genocide, Understanding the Human Cost of the Israel-Palestine Conflict, I'm honored to extend a heartfelt vote of thanks. First, a special thanks to you, Professor Martin Shaw, for guiding us through such a profound discussion. Your insights have not into the historical backdrop of colonialism and decolonization have deepened our understanding of the Israel-Palestine struggle, and your reflections on the League of Nations mandate, the European settlers, and the parallels with conflicts in Algeria and Zimbabwe have truly illuminated the complexities we face today. Thank you for addressing critical themes like the persecution of Jews, the right of self-determination, and the strategic importance of the Middle East, as you have challenged us to look beyond binary thinking and consider the nuanced realities of this conflict, reminding us that coexistence is essential. And your exploration of secularism in the Arab world, the two-state solution, and the ongoing volatility in Israel and Palestine shed light on the difficult path toward reconciliation. The historical trauma experienced by both sides must inform our discussions. And your insights into the roles of leaders, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, have been eye-opening. To all the attendees, thank you for your thoughtful participation and engagement. Your dedication to these complex issues is what keeps the dialogue alive. I would also like to express gratitude to the organizing committee and all the volunteers for ensuring the seminar's success. Lastly, a special thank to Dr. Shubda Chaudhary for bringing such an eminent personality like Professor Shaw to our podcast and for her efforts as a moderator. And ma'am, your contributions are invaluable. And as we conclude, let's carry us a renewed hope for a future where dialogue prevails over division. Together, may we continue to strive for understanding and reconciliation in our pursuit of peace. Thank you all once again.
Very good. This is how I am training them for anchoring, sir. And